Okay, so today I'm going to be demonstrating baking powder biscuits with cinnamon sugar, aka cinnamon buns. I love this recipe. It was a very basic biscuit recipe, but I like things really, really sweet because my last name is Sour. So I kicked it up a notch and I add some cinnamon and sugar at the end. So as usual, my hair is up, my apron's on, I've washed my hands for at least 20 seconds with warm soapy water. I have all my equipment out. To my right, I have all my ingredients out. To my left, and I have my recipe and management plan in front of me. So I'm hoping I have everything out, and as usual in class, you're gonna take these items out, you're gonna call me over to check, and then you're gonna measure everything, and you're gonna call me over to check again. So the first ingredient here is 2 cups of sifted all-purpose flour. So I'm gonna make sure I have a piece of wax paper big enough to hold that amount, and then another piece of wax paper for once it's measured. Because in class, you're gonna measure everything out, and then again, I'm gonna check it. So sifted flour is a little bit different than just regular flour. You wanna sift a bunch of flour first, and then you're going to lightly spoon and measure it. So it calls for 2 cups. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab a 1 cup measuring cup, and I'm just gonna take a bunch of flour, maybe like 2 big cupfuls, because that's what I'm going to need. And this is my sifter, which is gonna incorporate air and make it fluffier. I'm just gonna go a little bit more. So I have these metal sifters, and then I have plastic sifters in the classroom. Okay, so here you go with this one. You're just gonna crank this on the side. Sometimes when it gets to the bottom, basically what I do is I just tap it or get anything that's incorporated up on the side. And there's my sifted flour. So nice and easy with the metal sifter rather than the plastic one. I think takes a little bit longer. So now I haven't measured it. So at this point, I'm going to take my measuring cup, and again, I have another piece of wax paper. This is what some of you are tending not to do. You're ready to measure your ingredients out. You sifted your flour, but then you don't have another piece of wax paper to place it on. So I have another big enough piece of wax paper. I'm going to grab my spoon, and I'm going to grab a leveler. Okay, so another thing I told you guys to always do, if it calls for measuring cups, take out both sets. If it calls for a leveler, take out both levelers, so then you're not waiting for other students to finish with those items. So I've heaped it over, and I'm now going to level it off. There's my 1 cup. Then I'm going to take and lightly spoon and level off another. So basically what I did is I took 2 big cupfuls, okay, I sifted it, and look how much flour. It incorporated air and it made it fluffier. So it is important, okay, that you do what the directions tell you to do. And then there's my 2nd cup. So this extra flour now can just go right back into my container of flour. And there's my wax paper. And good, I'm going to put this to the side, seeing if you can see everything. The next ingredient is 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And I've told you that baking powder is a leavening agent. It's going to make these biscuits rise. This baking powder actually has a leveler on it. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but it has a metal piece right there. Not all the baking powder containers have that, so you would then need the leveler. So 1 tablespoon, which is the big one here. So again, make sure you're using the right measurement. I'm going to heap it over, and I'm going to basically take this and level it off. There's my leveler. Again, a big enough piece of wax paper. I'd rather you have a bigger piece of wax paper rather than not having enough wax paper too, because that's what I'm also seeing, that your pieces of wax paper aren't big enough, and then when you're trying to transfer them, you're losing your ingredients at the same time. Next ingredient is going to be regular granulated sugar. So again, I know that I can level off above my container. This just calls for 2 teaspoons of sugar. You don't need a lot of sugar in this recipe, because at the end, like I said, I like things sweet, so I add sugar and cinnamon at the end of this, on day 2 though. So 2 teaspoons regular granulated sugar, and then a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to make sure I'm checking my measurements, because I believe in one of the last videos I measured the cinnamon wrong in the French toast, and I said I needed salt. So a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna check it again. So again, I have one piece here and I have another piece there. You're gonna heap it over again. Going to level it off, and I'm gonna put, it's measured for here. Again, this extra is gonna go to the side. Next is a 1/4 cup of butter or shortening. I like to use butter in this recipe. So it's going to be a 1/2 stick of butter. If you didn't have butter, you could use shortening or Crisco at home. I just think it gives a flakier crust and better flavor using the butter. If you didn't have butter, you can also use margarine, okay? So I'm not gonna do anything with that yet. And then my last ingredient is going to be 3/4 of a cup of milk. And of course, I made another mistake. I took out everything but my liquid measuring cup. So my liquid measuring cup, I'm gonna make sure I have that actually on my equipment list, and I do, I just didn't read it properly. So what we're gonna do is we're actually using reduced fat milk, which is 2%. Sometimes you wanna use regular whole milk with baking recipes, but again, I try to reduce the fat content in this because it is not the healthiest biscuit. So we're gonna try to reduce a little bit of the fat content with reduced fat milk. So 3/4 of a cup, eye level, but this is not a flat surface, so we're gonna put it down on a flat surface. This is pretty heavy, so you're gonna make sure you can hold it. Eye level, flat surface, I'm just gonna go pinch more. Okay, I'm on the line at 3/4 of a cup. So at this point, you would call me over, Mrs. Sauer, can you check our ingredients? Give me a moment to get there, and I'm gonna come over and I'm gonna check that you have everything, and then I'm gonna tell you to move along with your directions. And another thing I don't have out again is a large bowl. Wow. Just didn't do what your teacher's doing now. I thought I had everything set up and ready to go. Oh well, I guess I lose some points on this one. All right, so here we go. It says, I'm gonna go along with my directions now. Put measured and sifted flour into a large bowl. So I have my large bowl. This is my measured and sifted flour. And I'm just placing it into the bowl here. And do that carefully. I almost dropped it from the other side. It then says sift baking powder, your 2 teaspoons of sugar, and your salt into your flour. So you're gonna, don't put your sifter away at this point because you're gonna need this again. So I'm just gonna place that there. I'm gonna take my baking powder, my 2 teaspoons of sugar, and my salt. And I'm just gonna do what the recipe says. A lot of that is just going right through it. And I'm just gonna sift that in. And I'm good to go. All right, next it says to cut in the shortening into the sifted ingredient. So I'm gonna take my shortening or my butter, and it says to cut in. So to cut in, you would use something called a biscuit cutter, which is a handheld tool. This is sharp right here. If you didn't have a pastry blender at home, you would just use 2 knives. Basically what this is it's used in a rocking motion to cut the butter up into small pieces, the size of coarse peas. So again, like small peas or coarse crumbs or anything like that. So you want to be careful with that when it should be chilled at this point. Okay, it's going to make it easier to cut with it. So this will take a minute or 2. Just using it in a rocking motion. Now it does get stuck in there because it is cold. So you could use whatever you have close by. If you have the 2 knives out, you can use the 2 knives to get it out. Many of you definitely will have a leveler, so you can use that. I also like to use the butter or the margarine because it's easier to see the pieces as you're cutting them up. If you were to use shortening or Crisco, it's white, just like the flour and other ingredients in here. So again, just go back and forth. And your dough is going to form better when your pieces are in smaller pieces. So you see what I'm doing? I'm taking the bowl with my left hand and turning it. And with my right, I'm just using this in a rocking motion back and forth. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to go another about 30 seconds. Again, use my knife here to get any of the excess out. My next step is going to be to make a well in the middle of the ingredients and to add my milk. So basically to make a well is just to make a little hole in the middle of my ingredients, and I'm just going to use whatever I have close by. I see that I have a spoon over to my right. So at this point, I don't see huge chunks of the butter. I'm getting all that extra out. I don't think you're going to be able to see any of this right now. Okay, but I have very small pieces of the butter. So I'm going to make a well. I'm going to take my spoon that I have here, just making a hole in the middle. I'm going to pour my milk all at once. And then my next next direction says to stir quickly with a fork until the dough follows, okay, the fork around the bowl. Okay, so watch, you're just using a fork, and it's going to do exactly what it says in the directions. Stir quickly with fork, only until the dough follows the fork around the bowl. So I'm kind of going back and forth. I just keep stirring. I'm getting the side of the bowl, just lifting it up, keeps coming together. I'm just stirring. You see how it's coming off the side of the bowl? That's exactly what you want. I just keep doing it. I have no crumbly mixture on the bottom. Basically almost lifted up here. See? It's a little sticky on the bottom. There's no dry ingredients there. So my next direction says to turn dough lightly on a floured surface. So I'm just going to wipe this off a little. Now you can use the table like this, or I'm going to have some cutting boards out. Because mine is a little wet right now, I'm going to take a flimsy cutting board and I'm going to take my flour, because now what we have to do is we have to knead. I'm going to take my cutting board, I'm going to lightly flour my surface. I'm not going to take this in my hands right now because it's going to stick to me, right? Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it out onto my board. And now I'm going to take some flour again and lightly flour this, because again, if I was to take it all in my hands, it's going to end up sticking. I want to get all of that dough. So kneading is a process of 3 words: pushing, folding, and turning. So I'm going to make sure I get flour all over on this, just kind of moving it around. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to push, fold, and turn. I'm just making sure all my dough is together right now. Okay, so I should probably have my sleeves up, but I have nobody here to help me. And black probably isn't the best color for this. So I'm going to push with the heels of your hand. You push, you fold, you turn. You push, you fold, you turn. I don't like the way that's working. My surface is dry here, so I'm going to go back onto the table because I'm dry. We definitely will be using that on day 2. So push, fold, turn. See how much easier our counter is going to work, or our table? These tables are cleaned by you throughout the day as well as myself. So push, fold, turn. You don't want to over knead this. It says about 10 to 15 strokes. I'm going to say I have at least 8 or 9. I haven't been counting. So I can kind of tell by the way it feels, and I'm going to say I'm done at this point. Okay? So that's basically it. That is it for day 1. Then tells me to spray plastic bags. So you would have somebody to help you with this. My hands are a little sticky right now. You're going to take a little bit of cooking spray. Make sure you get it in the bag. This is just to help prevent it from sticking. Just a little bit here and there. You don't want all yellow in the bag. You're going to place the dough in here. You could either twist it, you can make a knot in it, or I will have some twisty ties available. And at this point, we will label it with your period number and your lab number. Okay, so that's baking powder biscuits, aka cinnamon buns, day 1. Okay, so I'm probably going to do the second video tomorrow. All right, hope you enjoyed.